All right, chapter 9, we're talking about action and implementation, how to make things happen. So certainly some action planning tools that are useful. And again, these aren't just for organizational change. These are, in my impressive point, any employee should be doing these things to help make things happen. And if you're leading any type of team or any type of job, these are useful things to know. They are not, repeat, not exclusive to change agents. So one of the things, and I do this all the time, make a checklist of things to do, right? For a couple reasons. One, you won't forget. Two, you can prioritize the list. I have to do this today, but that can wait. But I don't have to worry, and then I don't have to worry about the stress of forgetting it because I've written it down. So it does reduce stress. And if I am feeling like, oh my God, this list is really long, I'll just pick a couple things and do it real quickly. Maybe I got to quick send an email here, fill out a form here, sign this thing, get it on. And I start knocking things off the list, and I just start feeling better. Look what progress I'm making, right? The list is getting shorter, not longer. So that's sort of a mental stress self-help thing you can do. Plus, it just makes you more efficient. And when things pop up, like always these random emails are coming into me that have nothing to do with your list, just ignore them for now, right? You got stuff to do, right? You got some important stuff you got to take care of. And if somebody wants to know something else, say, it's going to have to wait. Let's talk next week. I got this long list of things I'm working on. Responsibility charting: who will do what, when, where, how, why, and how. I think in terms of action and action items, right? Every meeting should end with some action items. Who, and every action item should have at least 3 things. Who is going to do this action? What is this action? And when are they going to do it by? Right? So when issues come up in a meeting, you should end with action items. Okay, these are the to-do lists for people. Who's the person? What are they going to do? And when are they going to do it by? And by the way, if they don't know, if they give you the I don't know when I can do it by, then you as a leader should push back and say, okay, when are you going to know? So you have the action to do this thing. Yes. When are you going to be able to have this thing finished? I don't know. Okay, so when are you going to know when you're going to have this action finished? And often you'll get people like, what? Yeah, if you don't know the finish date, tell me a date when you'll know the finish date. And often if they stall, just give them a date. Okay, so 2 days from now, you'll have time to look into this, and you should have an idea when you'll have this thing finished, right? Not when you're going to have it finished, but you should know in 2 days from now when you're going to have it finished. Is that reasonable? 48 hours? And if they say yes, okay, then your action item is to develop a completion date for this action item, right? And you're going to have that to us in 48 hours, correct? Okay, yeah, so you don't let people off the hook and just say, I don't know. You make sure they are held accountable for delivering a date and when they're going to get it. Right? Certainly contingency planning. If this doesn't work, what are we going to do? What's our backup plan? How's this going to work? And the more risk involved, the more contingency planning should go into it. Although again, no plan survives first contact. Things will come up that you don't have contingency plans for, and you're just going to have to develop them. Action planning tools. We can do survey and survey feedback. We can talk to people. We can ask them their opinion. We can ask them for suggestions. Sometimes the most obvious suggestions are overlooked, and they come from the most unexpected sources. So don't be afraid to cast the net wide. Just because someone isn't speaking doesn't mean they're not thinking. And just because you like to generate, or when you get an idea, you like to communicate it to the team, maybe they're waiting to be asked for whatever reason. We're going to talk about project planning in a separate video, but since I was a project manager, I'm going to give you some tips for becoming a project manager and for managing a project. And a lot of students find this very useful as they try to plan actions and activities and make them happen, not just for organizational change, but again, anything about their work. The force field analysis, you can read about that in the book, has to do when these forces, and generally people will go with the strongest force. So my force field, my inertia might be, I don't want to make this change, so I got to have enough pressure on this change to overcome it. Here's an example of responsibility charting. So we have an action, right? Somewhere we got to spell this action out. We can't just say action 1, we got to spell it out, right? Who's responsible for it? Who's going to prove it? Who they're going to tell. This approval and inform are less important than the responsibility. We really need to know, and generally the shortcut is we're going to have regular meetings and they're going to report back on their finished, or they're going to send the leader an email on the due date and let us know if it's finished or not, or some responsible person. Project planning, again, hang on, we're going to cover that in a separate email, separate video, and I'll give you some hints on how to handle that. Stages of adoption. Now we're back to talking about change again, right? And generally people have this, and you see politicians do this too, but they try to get an issue on the radar of the public. First is awareness, right? Becoming alerted to the existence, I should say, alerted to the existence of something new. So there's this new thing, there's this new threat, there's this new goal, there's this new vision, right? So this is, again, it's sort of like the burning platform. They got to be aware that, hey, this thing we've been doing successfully for a long time isn't successful as it used to be. Matter of fact, we're going to be in trouble if we don't make some changes soon. So I got to get their attention. Once I get their attention, then I got to get their interest, right? I got to get people to pay attention to what this thing is going on and learning about it, and then this desire. Hey, I want this. If the more emotional pull you can get for this idea, the better. Right? And then all of that will lead to action. A chart I very much believe in my history out there is you'll see this on this. This isn't really a bell curve like average intelligence. This is the amount of people accepting or adopting this change. First of all, you have these innovators. You have this percentage of people, maybe 8 to 10% of people, they like change. They're always looking for new and better ways to do things. They will jump on board just about anything that looks like change and looks like it might have a chance of working. And those are the people you certainly want on your team and supporting your team, right, to get the ball rolling. And after you have those people jump on board, typically the next group we call the early adopters. Oh, we see the innovators doing this new thing. That looks like it's for us. So we're going to look for us. Or if they don't see success, then they might not. So you want them to see success, hence the conversation about picking low fruit, documenting early successes, those type things, because that's so the early adopters who are watching the innovators will say, yes, that thing is working, we're going to jump on board. And once the early adopters start jumping on board, so if innovators are 10%, early adopters might be, 20% more. Now you got 30% of the people jumping on board. That's this tipping point. Other people say, hey, a third of the people working on this thing, I don't want to be one of the ones left behind. I'll start jumping on board, and you get this. Some people jump on board quicker than others. That's the early majority. And once you get the early majority on, it takes you over the hump, the halfway there, and then the late majority, people are like, oh, I guess that's a new way of doing stuff. I start jumping in. And then these laggards at the end, some of them may not ever want to jump on board, but generally it just becomes the thing we do, the way we do it, or whatever, and they're left with little choice. So don't focus on these folks, right? Focus on these two groups. Once you get these two groups right, it sort of falls in place. So very important. So communicating change. I talked about media redundancy. I talked about Jack Welch at GE, right? Restating the communication message over and over and over again, right? And including face-to-face. I even mentioned Jack did it at his meetings. He didn't just send out emails with his stakeholders, with his high-ranking VPs and all those people. He would talk to them over and over and over again about this change that he wanted. Line authority is most effective. So people talk to their people in their organizational line, and it goes right down the line, so that you get it sort of from the top, following down the chain of command. Not so much ordering you follow it, but the information that why this is important comes right down the chain of command, so they don't have to hear it the hallway. Immediate supervisor is key. Your immediate supervisor needs to be on board with the change. Otherwise, they're going to give you an idea. There is no burning platform. There is no immediacy here, and this change, it's probably going to go away and not happen, and then people will just resist. Right? So you need to find these opinion leaders, these informal leaders in the organization, and get to them, because often the people will look at them and go, what do you think? Right? And that's why the good thing to do is you try to find these people, these opinion leaders, and put them on the implementation team. So they're there making the decision. So they say, oh yeah, I was there. One, there is a burning platform. We have to make this change. And two, I was developed this change. And even though it's not perfect, trust me, it's the best of all the options available. It's the least painful of us. You're going to want to do this. And people will often say, oh, okay. All right, she said we should do this, so we're going to do it because she's been on the inside and I trust her and she's never let us down. So yeah, let's go ahead and do it. Right, and again, these employees tend to pick up personally relevant information. What's in it for me? How does this change me? How does this affect my favorite person, me? And so employees everybody's going to ask themselves that question. What does this mean to me? And I mentioned the difference between push and pull tactics, right? The pull tactics are inspirational, emotional appeals that say you want to do this because, and you get people to want to do this thing. Push tactics are the use of facts, logics, and all of those. I'm going to push you towards this. I'm going to show you why it's logically necessary to do this thing. And of course, if you can have both arguments, that's great. But understand, and we don't cover this in the book, but if somebody has an emotional objection to something, the logical explanation isn't going to work. So for instance, well, for it's a behavioral thing, if smokers understand the medical issues with smoking, then explaining the medical issues to them again is not going to work. They already know that, right? But they've made the decision to smoke anyway. So what do? You use emotional appeals, right? You try to get to them a different way, right? To get them motivated to go through the mental and the physical hassles of quitting smoking. So a emotional appeal to handle an emotional situation is much more likely to work. It rarely does a logical appeal change what is essentially an emotional argument. Some methods of influence, and we see these in motivational books or leadership books, right? Inspirational appeals. Join this thing. This is a big thing. We're going to do this thing, and it's going to be great. That's think of JFK giving his speech on why we're going to go to the moon, right? We're going to beat the Russians to space. We're going to go to the moon not because it is easy, but because it's difficult and get people excited about it. We're America. We need to be the best. So we're going to go to the moon because we want to show everybody we're the best. Consultation, all right? We're going to listen to, we're not just going to talk to others, we're going to listen to them. We're going to get their participation. What do you think? How might we do this, right? So this is this guiding team. Right, we're gonna look at the way things are, existing norms and relationship. We're gonna call in all our favors with our friends and those who appeal to us. All of those. Sometimes we got to praise the upper level people, especially. We got to say, "Oh, this was a great idea you had." You know, the old manager boss thing. Make them think sometimes some of this was their idea, or look you put me in this job and look how smart you were because these things are working. Rational persuasion. We mentioned the use of data to support your argument, and that works when you, except when you have emotional resistance. A coalition building, we talked again about the team, and appeals to higher authorities. We can, and certainly we need the stakeholders supporting us, and the more we can do with that, the better. Of the implementation tactics, intervention is when we get the high-level stakeholders in our organization to come back us up and explain why this is an important thing and why this change needs to happen. And generally, the early adoption rate is very high on that. And so these things work well. Participation is sort of the group. The group's going to figure out what to do, and the group's going to try to make it stick. That takes longer to do. Groups take longer. The persuasion, we're going to have a small group trying to persuade the others. And then the last one is the edict. Thou shalt do this because we said so. Right? That's the worst approach. That's the hammer, trying to hammer square pegs into round holes. It takes a long time to make it stick, and it's difficult to make it stick. So much better if you use the emotional approaches where you try to get things enrolled that way. Checklist for change. So some things to think about are if we're ready to change. How will the organization continue to operate as it shifts from one state to the next? So there's my little joke from the last chapter. We're gonna change the jet aircraft engine on the aircraft while it's in flight. So how can we keep working while this change is made? We can't just shut down. Who will answer questions about the proposed change? So where's our information source? Who do we talk to about these things? Do the people in charge of the transition have appropriate authority? Are they really in charge, or are they just delivering messages for other people? Right? And then have we developed ways to reduce anxiety created by the change? So how are we helping people get through this thing? Just order them to do it is not the way we want to go about it. We got to help them not only want to have this change, but reduce their anxiety about this change. Some other things to think about. How we work to develop like problem-solving skills and problem-solving climate so people feel like we can work this stuff out. How many thought about the need to communicate with change? So how we're going to communicate this change over and over and over again to people. How we're going to handle the transition. We need to have a transition plan and explain that to everybody. And how we thought about how we will celebrate the progress of this change. How will we know when it's working, right? That's a fair question. So things that are a good action plan. First of all, it should be doable. I mentioned our disdain where I used to work when the corporate people told us we should have 0 defects. We were making 25,000 cell phones a day, and somebody had the bright idea that we should have 0 defects. We should never make a bad one. Our attitude was, yeah, that's great. It's not that it never occurred to us, but how might one do that? It was beyond the process capabilities of the machines we were using. It was literally impossible to do. We need to think about a time sequence of conditional moves, and I'll show you how to make a schedule on that in the project management section. Again, responsibility charts. Who's going to do something? What are they going to do? When are they going to do it by? Those 3 things should should happen, and we should keep track of that. We should have minutes of the meeting, and we should update those. A lot of the accrediting bodies for organizations like ISO 9000 require that type of activity. Right? Measures and outcomes are specified. We should have things we can measure. The old SMART goals, right? Goals should be specific, measurable, attainable, relative, and time-based. Right? So we should have very specific goals that we're trying to achieve and when we're trying to achieve them by. Right? And this plan should be consistent with the analysis. We can't just ignore reality. This should be the things we want. So in this chapter, we looked at a plan with a team committed. We looked at different strategies for change. Right? We looked at action planning tools and action items, right? And we talked about communication and transition of this to members.